jailhouse lawyers. And then, of course, the revenge of the parents and Freddie finally getting burned alive, which would be, I'd have to wear the makeup for one day probably. Just fine by me. But that's one idea. The other one is that we're no longer going to have Freddie and Jason go against Ash from Evil Dead. I think Sam Raimi and his partners are remaking Evil Dead for a new audience with CGI and all the great special effects that we have now because of the new advanced technologies in Hollywood. And which I think is a good idea. I mean, I think that a new generation is ready for a big budget Evil Dead, as much as I love the original. But there has been some talk with John Carpenter, which would lead me to believe again, would lead me to believe that maybe Michael Myers would be involved, which would be kind of interesting. A good way to get Jamie Lee Curtis back and chase her around the block on Elm Street. So that's all the gossip that's fit the print. My connection to Divine Cinema, a wonderful guy who my agent and I know, he no longer has a home at Divine Cinema. He did Snakes on a Plane and more recently Shoot 'em Up with Clive Owen, terrific movie. And he's moved to another studio, so I don't really get my messages on the jumbled homes as much about what's going on. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm not thinking on the prequel question. An actor has played Freddy part without the makeup.
Well, I played Freddy without the makeup in part 6. Yeah, well, I think it would be in part 6 you see a little bit in Freddy versus Jason. I mean, I think I've always played Freddy older, so I don't think I'm too old to play Freddy without the makeup, because I always played him like late 40s. That's how old I thought he was. By the time he finally got burned. You know, in part 6 you see he's a little younger, but that's because that's when he's first starting out. You know, he's got the daughter and the wife and everything. He's not the lonely janitor, that turns into the burn victim. It would be interesting. I mean, it would be interesting to try to do it pretty straight. Really, every once in a while, just give the audience a little taste of the Freddy that's going to come. I've always imagined that Fred Krueger, before the burn, probably doesn't have any powers. He's just bad. And I think the idea that two wrongs don't make a right, the idea that he was a victim of vigilante parents, like the monster and the villagers and Frankenstein. The idea that Freddy never quite went to hell. He just sort of like went halfway to hell, and that's why he's able to haunt the dreams of the children and the relatives and the families of the parents that burned him alive. That's Freddy's revenge, in essence. And until he goes to each one of those people, he's not sort of done with his revenge, is sort of the way I've always interpreted it. So I would probably have to play, the child killer, a real serial killer. If we did when somebody as serious as John McNaughton, I'd have my work cut out for him if he was involved. Questions? Yes?
What about Cosmic?
What?
Cosmic. What about Cosmic? Your movie.
Which one? Vish or? Which one?
Around 2004.
Which one is that?
It's in the Cosmic.
I can't. Which one?
Cosmic, your film.
For the bad? No. I'm sorry. Not 2004?
2004, John.
What do you say? Which movie is she saying?
Cosmic in 2004, she say.
It came out in 2004?
I don't ever see that movie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not Which movie? I'm trying to do my movie on you in 2004. Anybody?
Never mind.
I'll try to think of what movie I did in 2004. I did a reality show. Was that it? Was it the Real Nightmares? The reality show. I spent all of 2004 doing a reality show that never got on the air. You'll never see it. So after that, I said, no, you'll never see it, which is why then I just began doing all of the movies that are coming out now, like Behind the Mask and my job with Toby Hooper and 2001 Maniacs and There's one Heartstopper that I did up in Canada for Bob Keane, who did the creature effects for Star Wars and one of the Hellraiser movies. So there's a lot of stuff floating out there. Hatchet is coming out, you guys, which is great old school horror. But there's I've got a stack of 45 records. They're all worth renting. More questions? Any questions?
Was it
I love my
hard?
club.
It was hard play in the mangler with the legs.
Oh, the Mangler.
The mangler.
Well, the Mangler, you know, it's interesting. I did the Mangler. What year was that, Nancy? 90? 93 or 92 or something like that?
95.
We began it in Canada and wound up having to go to South Africa. It was really interesting because, again, it was Toby Hooper and an extensive makeup. If any of you are real film buffs, you'll know that I stole that character from a movie called Lady from Shanghai, an Orson Welles movie that has the famous Hall of Mirrors shot. And the husband, the cuckolded husband of Rita Hayworth, he wears the braces on his legs. And he's a famous actor from all of the Orson Welles films. He was in his Mercury Players in New York. Brilliant actor. He's also one of the stars of Citizen Kane. And that's where I got the idea, because in the Stephen King source material, the Mangler is in that book of short stories along with Maximum Overdrive. He barely gets a paragraph of a description. Bill Gartley, the manager of a laundry or a little girl's work. And I was trying to imagine him, and I sort of imagined our old president, Harry Truman, you know, from the late 40s, early 50s. I figured he kind of looked like that, because he was supposed to look like a banker. But he was, you know, he's been around for a long time. He could have been alive for 100 years, that guy, for all we know. And I wore the braces that I stole from Lady from Shanghai, the leg braces, and they were real. And by the end of that shoot, I was like all scarred up on my legs from walking around on those things. That was not the best creative idea I've ever made. Any other questions? Anybody? Yeah.
If they would make a new TV series or movie, would you play Willie again?
Oh, well, you know, I don't know. Ball and Willie, the aging lizard boy.
I think so, at least.
I know that canary. No mice for me. But I think with the success that Steven Spielberg's taken on the Sci-Fi Channel, and I just finished working for them, great people. I just did a movie called Black Swarm, where I play an ex-CIA scientist turned environmentalist. And I'm sort of guilty because I'm creating these wasps that were like weapons, sort of like Day of the Dolphin, you know, wasps that are supposed to kill people. I'm investing with the DNA of insects. And, but the Sci-Fi Channel, they ran in America, they ran the 10-hour miniseries The Taken by Steven Spielberg, which I loved. I thought was great. The sequence where the alien turns the guy's guns on themselves, I thought was just brilliant and scary and creepy. And I really like a lot of people in that cast. But they obviously borrowed some ideas from me. You know, you had the pregnant alien girls and all of that good stuff.